Hello and welcome to Conversations with the Voice of Reason. I'm your host, Benjamin Boyce, and today's guest is someone who is preeminently suited to being a psychologist or therapist, and yet has been denied training in this area because he was discovered by his educational institution of expressing ideas on gender that were not approved by this particular institution and what seems to be the more powerful aspects of the psychological profession in the United Kingdom. Stories such as this are probably not terribly unfamiliar to you, and yet there's something preeminently disturbing about how authoritarians are shutting off debate and kicking people out of the ranks who would otherwise be doing exceptional work because they do not mouth the correct ideology. Without further ado, here is James Esses.
I kind of first entered this space by starting off as a volunteer counsellor with Childline, which is basically a children's charity over in the UK. And I've been doing that for about 6 years. And that was what actually got me into thinking, well, I find this so fulfilling helping these people that I want to do it with my life. So I began to cross-train as a psychotherapist. Historically, I've worked in law, in the UK civil service. So I started to undertake a master's course in psychotherapy, and I was 3 years through it. And my hope was that once I was finished that, I was going to go on and practice full-time as a psychotherapist and have my own clinical practice.
And what was the climate of psychotherapy? What did you find most exhilarating and most disappointing about this master's path?
I found the client work to be exhilarating. I think it's a real privilege to be face-to-face with someone and with them sharing some of the deepest parts of themselves that they wouldn't share with anyone else, actually having that insight into people and having the opportunity of potentially making a difference, a positive difference in their lives as a result of the work we would do together. I found that to be extremely fulfilling. In terms of the more downside, I found this with my course pretty early on, but it was clear that there was kind of a way that they wanted you to think about things. It was really quite directive. I found that there wasn't the opportunity to kind of have open, honest debate about what treatment should be like for people who are struggling. So I felt quite boxed in, I think.
And what was the theme of or the contours of this box that they wanted everybody to be in? Did you get a sense of like what that was about or where it came from? Was there any exploration of that, if not debate?
It kind of related to all the usual suspects, really, and it would usually be around issues such as diversity, inclusion, etc. So, when we had modules on that involving gender, involving race, I would find that it became quite preachy, quite directive, and almost this assumption that we all must, of course, because we're nice people, we must all think the same way about these things. Mm-hmm. So that would kind of shut down conversation before it could even begin, really, because I certainly kind of felt like if I expressed my true beliefs here, I could get shut down majorly. And so I think my peers would have felt even more so like that, because usually I'm willing to be more vocal about my beliefs than others might be. So, yeah, I found there was a lot of virtue signalling, I think, going on from management, from the tutors.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any sense, or did you develop a sense of how this basic belief system would affect clients in a very intimate setting where they're sorting through, trying to get onto their own legs or sorting through difficulties?
Completely. In a variety of contexts. I mean, obviously, most relevant for me is in relation to sex and gender, and I can go on to that in a second. But even in terms of race, because the mantra white privilege, male privilege, these were terms that were being used by my tutors, which felt very uncomfortable at the time. And I was always thinking, but, what does that say for our clients who are white and male? And actually, I had a client, I've had a number of clients, I think, over the years who kind of felt something similar along the lines of they felt like they were struggling in the world, and yet they felt that they shouldn't complain about it because of the fact that they were privileged. They felt that actually other people had it far worse than them. And because of the fact that they were born white, because of the fact they were born male, they should just get on with it. So there was that kind of self-talk going on, that kind of internalized guilt about feeling sorry for yourself when you're in a difficult position. So I think that was actually probably the biggest example to me that I've seen firsthand of someone kind of internalizing all of these social narratives that we've got around privilege, etc.
Did you ever find yourself in an opportunity to talk somebody or to kind of work through that with somebody and see how it's negatively affecting them or show them if and how it's negatively affecting them?
Look, it's not my role as a therapist to kind of engage in preaching or politicking myself. But what I would always do is to come back to basics in terms of empathy, which is that if I might hear a comment about, well, I shouldn't feel this way because I'm privileged in other respects, etc., and I would just kind of pause and get into a reflective space and kind of reflect back to them the emotion that I could sense from them, or some of the difficult things that they've told me that they've experienced. And I would kind of, I would reflect back the point that, yes, we're all privileged and disadvantaged in different ways in our life, but that doesn't take away from the fact that you yourself are going through a difficult time right now.
Okay.
And I would find that would help us get into a different space, actually, of it more in touch with what's going on inside them rather than some sort of worry about how they're perceived by society more generally.
Mm-hmm. And that is one aspect of what I think is kind of this bigger issue, or all this connected different ideas that are floating around. But it's very relevant to when a young person or any person of any age comes to you with gender issues or dealing with their gender. And in those contexts, what did you perceive as the correct way to help somebody through that?
Well, I mean, the kind of my institute, my membership body, they're all signed up to, a framework around. I mean, the framework is about conversion therapy, which was what got me into this in the first place, in the petition that I launched to the UK government. But it's at its very heart, it basically supports this idea that sex is mutable and fluid and changeable. So for me, with a counter belief to that, it's there in opposition against one another, and you feel as if you cannot even have a discussion about this. It's almost held as a stick above you. So when I discovered that kind of governing document, and then the way that I was being taught on my course, it was sending a message loud and clear to trainees that, you should be affirming people in what they're saying. And if someone is saying they were born in the wrong body and they're the wrong sex, that you should be affirming them and supporting them in their transition, almost unconditionally, it appeared to me. As I said, that ran counter to my kind of fundamental beliefs about sex and gender generally, but also ethically as therapists. We should not go into contacts with our clients with any preconceived notion of where we should end up with them. But actually, if you go in assuming you're going to affirm somebody into transitioning, you're doing exactly that. And my argument has always been we must explore these things as we do for any other mental health condition or any other anxiety-provoking thought or feeling that someone might have.
This is kind of cliche at this point, but why would these medical institutes and these governing boards affirm a concept of being born in the wrong sex, but not affirm the thought that one is born with the wrong weight? Why do they affirm gender dysphoria or gender identity and not anorexia? Do they have is there a reasoning that you've seen, and why one, not the other? Why gender is the affirmed thing?
I think it comes back down to kind of beliefs again. And what's happening is the beliefs of these organizations are then affecting the clinical decisions that they're making. Because, I think that when it comes to something like body dysmorphia, when it comes to anorexia, the consensus is that these are mental health conditions. Whatever someone might think about themselves, their body might well be some sort of fantasy, and it's not our duty to affirm those thoughts. It's our duty to do what's in their best interests. But actually, now, if organisations have beliefs that sex is completely fluid, well then, if someone comes into your counselling room and says, I was born in the wrong sex, well, yeah, probably. It's almost a kind of idea of, well, who am I to question that? And so, but that doesn't sit right, because we have something called gender dysphoria, and that is a recognised mental health condition. And I'm forever being told and forever hearing we shouldn't pathologise this, but what choice do we have? It's a mental health condition. That to pathologise doesn't mean to stigmatise, it doesn't mean to discredit, it doesn't mean to disrespect. But what it does mean is to look at things holistically and actually make sure that we're putting people down a proper treatment pathway for these things.
And so you took to the open and started speaking about this aloud. You're not the only one. You're not the first, but why did you step up? What compelled you to go outside of the box?
Originally, I found myself at Childline speaking to more and more young children of younger ages with questions that they were born in the wrong body. And so I took it upon myself to really dive into all of the research and literature I could on it. And then I found myself becoming more and more concerned with the status quo. And at the start, I just wanted to have a conversation. I tried to engage individuals at my institute in conversation. I tried to engage my membership body in a conversation. I was met with kind of almost threatening type behaviour, along the lines of that I would be reported for even having questioned these things in the first place. So that told me very clearly that a lot of these professionals that I was governed by weren't willing to have a conversation with me. So it was as a result of that I ended up going externally. I put forward that petition to the UK government.
What was this petition?
So the UK government had said that they were going to introduce legislation to ban conversion therapy, which is a very noble piece of legislation, and a lot of harm has been done in terms of conversion therapy historically against those who are gay. But my concern is, having seen what's happened with similar legislation in other countries, that it ends up conflating gender identity with sexual orientation, and it can end up being so broad and ambiguous that it could potentially criminalise therapists who do anything other than affirm someone into transitioning. Mm-hmm. So I launched a petition to the UK government basically saying, this legislation in principle is fine, but can you please make sure you safeguard therapy, particularly for vulnerable children?
Mm-hmm. And how was that received? Did the petition get some legs underneath it?
It did. Within a few weeks, we got 10,000 signatures, which meant that the government had to respond to us, and they responded a few weeks ago. And actually, it was pretty heartwarming to see what they'd responded. They gave a number of assurances. They said any legislation they introduce will uphold free speech, will safeguard vulnerable children, and will protect the independence of clinicians. So for me, that felt like a real, I suppose it kind of justified everything I've been saying, really. And it emphasised to me that my beliefs, although my institute might say otherwise, were not radical, were not abhorrent, because the government have kind of made statements in line with what I was asking for.
And so far, the sense that I get is that these beliefs of yours, that you just said your beliefs, it's more about a process of what therapy should be rather than an outcome-driven, what you believe sex and gender to be. But I'm sure you do have beliefs such as sex being a biological reality that's immutable. Yes. But in the context of therapy, what would ideally be the way that you deal with somebody with these struggles with gender? Would it be to oppose them, or how does one go about doing something other than affirming or converting?
Yeah, and I think that's been a narrative I've had thrown at me quite a bit, which is that, well, if you don't affirm, by definition you're opposing, and it's simply not the truth. I mean, as therapists, we have to be comfortable with living in the realm of uncertainty and shades of grey, and not actually going into all or nothing, black or white thinking. So applying that principle to gender dysphoria, it should be exactly that. It should be a case of taking the time, being curious, being explorative, maybe even being gently challenging, to try and work with that individual to see what really is going on here. What could be contributing towards this? Because I've read so much research showing that often there's other contributory factors to gender dysphoria, often other mental health diagnoses, often historic trauma or bullying, even things such as internalized homophobia. Everyone's going to be completely different, so we shouldn't have a blanket approach to this. We should unpack these things slowly, because the implications and the consequences could be severe. If someone goes down the medical pathway, they could end up making irreversible changes to themselves. And I think talking therapy should be there to really open this up and explore what the options are, actually. So I don't pose to deal with this in a way that I wouldn't deal with any other presentation. That's what's been so strange for me. It's that gender and sex seems to be held out on its own pedestal. But as I said, when I'm dealing with mental health struggles, I would approach these in all the same way.
What are your thoughts on why the establishment has gone down this path, schools and clinical bodies? Because it seems like within the case of gender and sex, if it's all affirmation, then there's no need for therapy. You're just taking yourself out of the equation or turning yourself into a rubber stamp for other therapies, right? So it seems like they're eroding their own profession by going down this path. I don't understand. Or do you understand why?
As I said earlier, I think it's a combination of actually the world of therapy seems to have been, and this applies to a lot of other entities and a lot of other professions, but it does seem to be kind of taken over by those who actually hold these beliefs that sex is completely fluid, that people are, that men can give birth, that people are assigned a sex at birth. I think a lot of these people have actually taken on very powerful positions in a lot of these organizations. In fact, there's kind of working groups in my world who kind of control, if you recall that framework I was talking about earlier, that therapists have to abide by. And actually, a number of individuals who are on that working group, I think themselves would say that they were transgender activists. So I'm not really sure how they can make kind of impartial decisions on that basis. But So yes, I think it's a combination of genuinely holding those beliefs, and then also what seems to be happening in society around this fear that if you do not virtue signal and if you do not appear to be an ally, then you will face the woke mob, really. And but it's difficult to know what's real and what isn't. I mean, when I was expelled by my university, the same evening they posted on Twitter about it, and they also included a kind of statement at the bottom about the fact that they stand in solidarity with the LGBT community. I mean, for me, that was very much them kind of making it about them and us. You know, we're with you, and we're not with, you know, awful people like James S's. It was very strange, but I couldn't work out whether that's because they really do view me as absolutely vile and abhorrent, or whether they're just virtue signalling. I think it's probably a bit of both.
So you got expelled. You sunk 3 years of your life into this program. And how long are the programs? Are they 5, 4 years? How close were you to the finish line? 5? Okay. So that's a significant amount of investment that you put into that. Did they sever your ties unceremoniously? What was their response directly to you?
So and these dates will forever be cemented in my head, unfortunately, but on the 5th of May, I received an email from senior management, the deputy CEO, saying they'd received a few complaints, including over Twitter, about my petition, about my advocacy, and they wanted to have an informal conversation to discuss it. They made it very clear to emphasize it was informal. And they said, are you free in 2 days' time? And I responded, and I said I was feeling quite anxious about it, which I was, because it came out of the blue. But I said, of course, I will take part in this conversation. They hadn't provided me with any evidence or any substance yet, and I actually had to go back and request that. But their response to me saying I was anxious was, we don't want to make you feel anxious at all. This really is just an informal conversation. So I felt very reassured by that, and I thought, they're just going through a process. We have to be honest about these things, and I'll do what's the right thing, and I will be open and transparent with them. And then the next day, so less than 24 hours later, I received a notification on my laptop, and the email subject line included the word termination. And the second I saw it, and I saw who it was from, my heart just sunk. And what I read were 2 paragraphs telling me that actually they had now decided that I brought them into disrepute, and they had no choice but to expel me with immediate effect, and that the meeting scheduled would not take place. And when I went to respond to that email, I discovered they had already blocked my university email account. So I very literally was expelled over email without ever having had a conversation with someone.
What were the steps for you to achieve some sort of fairness in this process? Were there any avenues of complaint or?
Well, nothing. I mean, as I said, I couldn't get back in contact with them. I also had my access to my student portal blocked, which means I couldn't even go and view the policies that they were meant to have done this under. I was not offered any appeal process. That was it. I actually, until I then started my legal action, I didn't hear from them for months. It was as if as far as they were concerned, I just disappeared into the ether. Very bizarre.
It's kind of enraging. Well, maybe not enraging, but it stirs a desire for vengeance in me if that were to happen to me. If these organizing bodies have taken on this stance, this belief, and there's no arguing with it, and they won't even open up any sort of discussion about why they think that affirmation only is the best policy, that makes them weak with being able to argue about that because they don't see both sides of the argument and they aren't practiced in arguing that. It's just, it's by fiat. They take it to the next level by not just, silencing dissent, but actively kind of disappearing dissent from their ranks whatsoever. So it only seems tenable insofar as they can maintain power and they don't have to have any sort of accountability for that. So it seems like the legal action that you're taking might be able to hold them accountable or at least open up the books on that. But what were your intentions with the legal action?
Well, I mean, it took me a while to get my head together because I was in a pretty bad state. Because as far as I was concerned, my entire life plan and even my reputation, to some extent, had been completely thrown up in the air. And, you know, it took a few days before I actually thought, well, I do need to do something about this, actually, because there's a real sense of injustice here. So, I reached out to some solicitors and it was off the back of that I had it hammered home to me, actually. And I hadn't, you know, I felt injustice, but I wasn't sure what's happened here. And I had it hammered home to me by my now solicitor that, you know, what's happened isn't just a kind of breach of the contract between you and them, but actually it's discrimination because you have these core set of beliefs and they've treated you in a way that they would never treat any other student, and they've thrown the policy book out the window because they don't agree with your beliefs. So that's basically led to where we are now. And that forms the basis of the case that I'm now crowdfunding towards.
Mm-hmm. So the discrimination on behalf of beliefs, in what way is this college or this educational institute accountable through the legal system? Are they a state institution, or are they bound by anti-discrimination laws generally or specifically? Or
yeah, so because they're an institution, they're bound by the Equality Act in the United Kingdom, which sets out a number of protected characteristics. And actually, there's a recent case which the judgment was only handed down over the last month or two. A woman named Maya Forstater, I'm not sure if you've heard of her, but what that did for the first time actually in England and Wales was enshrine gender critical beliefs as a protected characteristic. So basically what I'm saying is this: I have this protected characteristic, which was my gender critical beliefs, and it was as a result of those beliefs that they then treated me badly and unfairly and discriminated against me, and they've caused me serious harm as a result of that. Mm-hmm. So they can be held to account under those provisions.
So this case is underway. Do you have any, like, a ballpark of how long you think it might take? How do you guys, do you know what stage you're even in at this point? You just submitted some papers and then you wait a month and then you get something back?
Yes, I mean, we really are at the very beginning of this. As I said, the crowdfunding campaign, and, you know, had the crowdfunding campaign not come good, I wouldn't have been able to afford the fees myself, so it just would have fallen at the first hurdle. That was only launched yesterday. I mean, it feels like a lifetime ago. It was only launched yesterday. So, yes, the next step is to formally lodge the claim and then take it from there, really. I mean, you know, there's backlogs because of COVID in the judicial system over here. So I certainly, if this was to proceed to a trial, I am doubtful it would be before mid next year. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it could be a long path ahead, I think, but it's still worth it, I think, because of what's happened. And even if there are bumps along the way, I still think it's something I'd have to pursue.
Well, it's not just important for you, but for the entire dialogue. And perhaps it will force these institutions to actually open up about these beliefs that they're instituting and start to, you know, come clean on that front, but also not being able to treat other people like they've treated you. Well, what are you going to do in the meantime?
I'm still thankfully in employment. You know, as I said, I was making my own transition into this new vocation. So I'm very thankful that I have that and I still have a roof over my head and I can still pay the bills. But in terms of therapy, I'm not sure. I'm kind of in a state of limbo. It's as I said, my reputation's kind of been thrown up into the air. It's a very small world, so undoubtedly all the other kind of training institutes will be aware of what's happened to me, and I wouldn't be surprised if therefore they would view any application from me with some suspicion, because one of their fellow institutes has saw fit to expel me for what I did. So I don't really know what I'm going to do. It kind of feels like my vocational career has ended before it's even begun, and I don't know. I need the dust to settle a bit longer.
Yeah.
I think much of this will simply rest on the outcome of the legal proceedings, and can I clear my name, and if so, then I would very much like to kind of get back into this world again, because as I said, the reason I decided to do this in the first place was because I found it very fulfilling, because I wanted to make a difference, a tangible difference to people's lives. So I hope it's not the end of this path for me, but everything's quite uncertain at the moment.
Yeah. Just speaking with you for the past half hour, you have a very therapeutic presence, and the industry would suffer a loss without you in it. And I've spoken with several other people in your same position in America and other places, and it seems like a certain sort of professional is being pushed out of these professions, and over time there's going to be a huge brain drain, and there will be the need for other professional institutes to come along and make sure that people like you get to do the work that it seems like you are incredibly suited for. That's a 20, 30-year project, though, perhaps, if things don't kind of change.
Yeah, I do agree. I think it's very difficult, particularly in the UK, because there's a couple of membership bodies that hold a bit of a monopoly on this. So everyone wants to be accredited with them, because if you're not, then you will struggle to publicise yourself, and you might struggle to get clients. So people are almost forced into registering with them. So I agree with you completely that there does need to be an alternative out there, not just in the interests of the profession, but in the interests of the clients that we're also seeking to serve. I've spoken to so many would-be clients who've said that they're disillusioned with the type of therapists that are on offer to them these days, and they want to see someone who isn't, for example, solely going to affirm them, or who isn't going to presume that they have white privilege just because of the colour of their skin.
Are you interested in doing any sort of advocacy work around this, or beyond what you're doing, or would you rather pour your energy into other things?
I'd like to try and make a difference in society if I can, so I'm certainly open to other forms of advocacy. That's what got me into this situation in the first place, was kind of standing up for my beliefs. So if some good can come from the bad situation that I'm in, then maybe, that can only be a good thing. But I don't know. We've spoken predominantly about sex and gender, and we've touched a bit upon race theory, but there's so many other themes that are currently existing in society that I think are to our detriment, and coming from a therapeutic point of view, are not good for people's well-being and their mental health overall. I think identity politics in general is quite damaging for people's well-being.
Having witnessed it firsthand myself in its more extreme manifestations, I tend to agree. Is there something you do besides noodle with people's minds and study? And do you have a hobby, a super interest? Are you a sailor or a painter or a poet?
No, nothing that exotic, unfortunately. What do I enjoy doing? I enjoy wine, though I'm sure anyone watching this will then assume that I'm an alcoholic off the back of that.
Well, you could be a sommelier.
I actually, to be honest, I actually did a wine tasting course, though all of my friends seemed to think that I only did that to drink the free wine that was on offer as part of it. But so I do have some certificate in wine tasting. So I suppose I can always use that to justify my drinking. Just traveling, adventure. I'm looking forward to things opening up after COVID, hopefully, eventually. I'm looking forward to coming back to the States at some point as well. It's been too long.
You've traveled through the Americas?
Yeah. I was in South America, actually, when the pandemic hit, and I was very close to being stranded in Chile because when the borders were closing. So actually, I'm thankful to have even made it back to the UK at all. So that was exciting. But yes, I love America. I think it's a great place. So if you guys could open up your borders and be a bit more flexible, that would be appreciated.
We have a lot of different issues going on over here. I don't know how it's all going to shake out. Do you have any a parting salvo? How about this? What is the idea or the thought or the perspective or a quote or something that's helped you to maintain a center or grounding during this tumult? How have you, what have you clung to or looked to get through it?
A few years ago, I met one of my political idols, and it was kind of a meet and greet session. I was extremely nervous about it because I'd never really spoken to him before. I'd seen him at so many events, but he's not without controversy, and it had cost me quite a lot even just supporting him. And I went up, and that's what I said to him. I remember what I said exactly. I think I said, what did I say? I said, supporting you has cost me relationships and friendships in my life, but I have no regrets. And he spent 5 minutes talking to me and basically kind of imparted upon me that no matter what I do, if you follow your beliefs, you're going to have people who try and drag you down, who try and ruin your reputation, and also try and tell you that it isn't possible. And he said, just do not listen to them, and always go with your gut and always fight for what you believe in. And that message has stuck with me, and it's informed everything that I've done ever since. And so I'm just happy that I'm being true to myself, and I'm happy that although having my beliefs and standing up for them has gotten me into this awful mess, I'm still happy that I've taken his advice and I've tried to be strong enough to just roll with it anyway.
There are many reputable people supporting your crowd funding efforts. And just to dispel any worries about where that money goes in case people stumble upon this and want to donate, what is the crowdfunding thing for, and how where does the money go?
Yeah, so it's an organisation called Crowd Justice. It's been used to fund quite a lot of high-profile cases in the UK, including that Maya Forstater case that I mentioned earlier. It's all completely regulated. It all has to comply with money laundering regulations. I, as the kind of crowdfunder, never see the money. My solicitors are already approved and on their system. And so it's a way to enable my solicitors basically to get paid for the work that they're doing. I mean, the website itself gives a great deal of reassurance in terms of where people's money goes. So, yes, I mean, we've done really well. My initial target was 50. Just before I hopped on this call, I think it was at about 42,000.
We're talking Great British pounds?
Pounds, yes.
Yeah.
And that's inclusive of tax and also a small cut that the Crowd Justice platform gets. But yes, so if people would like to either read about the cause or donate, they can find the crowdfunding link on my Twitter, which is just my name, James Esses, and I've got a whole crowdfunding page where I talk through exactly what happened to me and the action that I'm taking.
And where can people find you and read up on you and follow your work?
Again, Twitter is probably the best bet. I mean, I'm very late in the day to Twitter. I only got it in May of this year. So I
do the shit show.
I know. Actually, I think my life was probably a lot happier before I discovered Twitter. But there we go. I'm in it now. So yes, I think Twitter is probably the best place to look. But also, I've taken part, particularly over recent days, in a variety of interviews, and I've been interviewed for some UK newspapers as well. So I think even just typing my name into Google should produce some of that.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining me, and sorry for your position, but I'm really glad that you're standing up on principle.
Thank you for having me. It's been an enjoyable conversation. I enjoy these types of kind of open dialogue and shooting the breeze a bit, and certainly be interested to talk to you again at some point, particularly when things progress a bit further down the line.
Absolutely. Congratulations for reaching the end of the discussion. If you enjoyed it, do be sure to leave a review or a comment or a thumbs up or whatever you need to do to show that glorious algorithm that this is some good stuff. And do be sure to go and check that back catalog, as it is brimming full of fantastic conversations. Links to provide monetary support are down there in the description as well. Have a good night.